The tassel on my graduation cap whipped across my face, stinging my cheek, but I barely noticed. All I could see was my family, beaming at me from the crowd. Years of ramen noodles, late-night study sessions fueled by cheap coffee, and the constant gnawing fear of failure had all culminated in this one moment. A moment they were all sharing with me. They were so proud, and I, Nora, was so naive, so blissfully unaware that the foundation of my future, the very ground I stood on, was about to be ripped away. If you have a sister who's always been your rock. The graduation party was a blur of well-wishers and congratulatory speeches. Dad made his usual embarrassing jokes, Mom fussed over my hair, and my older sister, Sarah, gave me a hug that squeezed the breath out of me. "We're so proud of you, Nora," she whispered in my ear. I smiled, genuinely touched. Sarah had always been my biggest supporter, my confidant, the one person I could always count on. She'd even helped me pack up my dorm room. We'd laughed as we reminisced about some of the bad decisions I'd made over the past 4 years. The lake house had always been our family's escape. Summers were spent swimming, fishing, and building sandcastles on the shore. It was more than just a house. It was a repository of memories, of laughter, and of shared experiences that bound us together. I can remember learning to ride my bike there, the skinned knees, the scraped elbows, but the joy of that first wobbly ride. The lake house was where I felt most at home, most at peace. It represented everything good in our lives. I could not have been more wrong. My stomach clenched. Sarah only used that tone when something was seriously wrong. The words hit me like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin. "What?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper. "Your loans, Nora," she said, avoiding my gaze. "They're crippling." It made sense, in a twisted, logical way, but the thought of losing the lake house, our sanctuary, felt unbearable. I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "We've explored every option, Nora," Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. "This is the only way. Besides," she added with a brittle smile, "think of it as an investment in your future." I wanted to believe her, but a knot of unease tightened in my chest. It felt too calculated, too final. The following week was a whirlwind of paperwork and meetings with bank representatives. My parents were supportive, reassuring me that everything would be all right. But Sarah was the one who took the lead, handling all the details with a chilling efficiency. She found a buyer quickly, a wealthy businessman who was eager to turn our beloved lake house into a vacation rental property. I tried to argue, to reason with them, but my protests fell on deaf ears. "It's for the best, Nora," Sarah repeated, her voice unwavering. I wanted to trust her. I desperately wanted to believe that she had my best interests at heart. But something felt wrong, deeply, irrevocably wrong. The day the sale was finalized, I stood on the porch of the lake house, watching as the new owner's moving trucks pulled up the driveway. The weight of what we were losing settled upon me like a shroud. As I turned to leave, I noticed Sarah standing by the window, talking on her phone. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but I could hear enough to make my blood run cold. "Yes," she said, her voice laced with a smug satisfaction that I had never heard before. "It's done." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My share? What share? The person I trusted most? Was one of them. The world tilted on its axis. My breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in my throat. Sarah's words replayed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow against my sanity. It couldn't be true. Sarah, my sister, my rock, had betrayed me, but the smugness in her voice, the cold calculation, left no room for doubt. The lake house wasn't about saving me from debt, it was about lining her own pockets. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled away from the window, the idyllic scene of the lake house, the laughter-filled summers, now tainted with a bitter, corrosive truth. I drove home in a daze, the familiar route transformed into a labyrinth of confusion and anger. How could she do this? How could she betray me so callously, so completely? The questions clawed at my insides, demanding answers that I wasn't sure I could bear to hear. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me, twisting memories of Sarah into grotesque parodies of sisterly affection. I saw her laughing, counting stacks of money, while the lake house crumbled into dust around me. I woke up each morning exhausted, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me like a physical burden. I tried to confront her, but she deflected my accusations with practiced ease. "Nora, you're being paranoid," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "The stress of graduation is getting to you." Her lies were like shards of glass, twisting deeper into the wound. I knew she was lying, but I couldn't prove it. She was too careful, too clever. So, I started digging. I spent hours poring over bank statements, tax documents, anything that might offer a clue to her deception. I felt like a detective in a bad movie, fueled by caffeine and a burning need for justice. My apartment transformed into a war room, covered in sticky notes and highlighted documents. I barely ate, barely slept, consumed by the single-minded pursuit of the truth. My friends noticed the change in me. They saw the dark circles under my eyes, the haunted look in my gaze. They tried to offer support, to pull me back from the brink, but I pushed them away. I couldn't trust anyone, not even them. Sarah's betrayal had poisoned everything, leaving me isolated and alone. One evening, after weeks of fruitless searching, I finally found something. A small, almost insignificant transaction, hidden among a maze of larger payments. A transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, bearing Sarah's name. It was the smoking gun, the proof I needed to expose her lies. But it wasn't enough. I knew that simply presenting this evidence to my parents wouldn't be enough. Sarah would deny it, twist the narrative, and somehow manage to come out on top. I needed a plan, a strategy to not only expose her betrayal, but to ensure that she faced the consequences of her actions. I started documenting everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every lie. I became a meticulous collector of evidence, building a case that would be airtight, unbreakable. I acted as if nothing had changed, smiling and nodding as Sarah continued her charade of sisterly concern. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The anger that had been simmering inside me began to coalesce into a cold, calculating resolve. I wouldn't let her get away with this. She had taken away my peace, my sense of security, my trust in family. Now it was my turn to take something from her. The hardest part was pretending that I still loved and trusted her. Every hug felt like a betrayal of myself, every forced smile a testament to the depths of her deception. But I knew that I had to play the part, to lull her into a false sense of security, until the moment was right to strike. She thought she was clever, untouchable, but she underestimated me. She thought I was weak, naive, still the little sister she could manipulate. She was wrong. The sleepless nights continued. My thoughts were a whirlwind. Every possible scenario played out in my head. What if I was wrong? What if I confronted her and she somehow managed to turn the tables again? What if my parents refused to believe me? The fear was a constant companion, gnawing at my confidence, but I refused to let it paralyze me. I channeled my fear into determination, using it as fuel to drive my investigation forward. I thought about the lake house, about the memories we had made there, about the joy it had brought our family, and I thought about Sarah, about her cold, calculating betrayal, and the injustice of it all. The more I thought, the more my resolve hardened. I would expose her no matter the cost. It would hurt my parents. They would be heartbroken and confused. It would fracture our family. There was no way around that. But I couldn't let Sarah's greed and deception go unpunished. It would set a precedent that I couldn't live with. The weight of that decision was immense, but I knew it was the right one. I started practicing what I would say, rehearsing the confrontation in my head. I imagined her reaction, her denials, her attempts to manipulate me. And I prepared myself to counter them, to stand firm in the face of her lies. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. The day was coming. The breaking point came on my birthday. I'd turned 23. It felt like the cruelest joke the universe could play. I woke up alone in my apartment, the silence amplifying the emptiness that had taken root in my soul. A single text message from my mom was the only acknowledgement of the day. "Happy birthday, sweetie." No mention of Sarah, no explanation. Just a hollow promise of a future celebration that I knew would never be the same. I tried to force down some toast, but my stomach churned in protest. Food had become a chore, a reminder of the simple pleasures that had been stolen from me. I wandered aimlessly around my apartment, my gaze falling on a framed photo of Sarah and me at the lake house. We were laughing, our arms wrapped around each other, the sun glinting off the water behind us. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the outline of Sarah's face. The image blurred through my tears, the happy memory now a painful reminder of what I had lost. With a choked sob, I threw the photo against the wall. The glass shattered, the shards scattering across the floor like fallen stars. It mirrored the shattered pieces of my heart, the fragments of trust and love that Sarah had so carelessly destroyed. That's when the darkness threatened to consume me, the weight of the betrayal, the loneliness, the uncertainty of the future. It was all too much. I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands, the sobs racking my body. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of despair. The thought crossed my mind to just let go, to surrender to the darkness, to silence the pain. It was a tempting escape, a way to end the suffering. But then, a flicker of defiance sparked within me. A memory surfaced, unbidden, of my grandmother, a woman of immense strength and resilience. She had faced unimaginable hardships in her life, yet she had always persevered, her spirit unbroken. I remembered her words, spoken to me when I was a child facing a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Never let anyone extinguish your light, Nora. Her words resonated with me, piercing through the fog of despair. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and slowly, painstakingly, began to piece myself back together. I stood up, my legs shaky, and surveyed the wreckage around me, the shattered photo, the scattered glass, the mess I had made. It was a reflection of my inner turmoil, but it was also a symbol of my resolve. I would not let Sarah break me. I would not let her steal my future. I would not let the darkness win. I started cleaning up the broken glass, carefully picking up each shard, mindful of the sharp edges. As I cleaned, my thoughts began to crystallize. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control what I did next. I would not seek revenge out of anger or spite, but out of a sense of justice. Sarah had made a choice, and she would face the consequences of that choice. I would expose her betrayal, not to inflict pain, but to reclaim my own power. The transition was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was profound. The victim mentality began to recede, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. I stopped crying. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped seeing myself as a pawn in Sarah's game. Instead, I became a strategist, a planner, a force to be reckoned with. I spent the rest of the day researching, gathering information, refining my plan. I learned about offshore accounts, about corporate structures, about the legal loopholes that Sarah had exploited. I became an expert in her deception, understanding every detail of her scheme. The more I learned, the more determined I became. I would not be outsmarted. I would not be silenced. I would expose her lies, and I would make sure that she paid for what she had done. As darkness fell, I stood at my window, gazing out at the city lights. The city seemed to pulse with a frenetic energy, a symphony of ambition and greed. I knew that Sarah was out there somewhere, enjoying the fruits of her betrayal, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. A faint smile played on my lips. She thought she had won. She thought she was untouchable. But she was wrong. The game had just begun. The person I was before was gone. The naive, trusting sister had been replaced by someone new, someone harder, someone colder, someone who would stop at nothing to get justice, and I wouldn't let her get away with it. The first step was securing irrefutable proof. The offshore account was a start, but I needed more to paint the full picture of Sarah's treachery. I decided to focus on her communications. I knew she used encrypted messaging apps, thinking she was untraceable, but everyone has a weakness. Hers was convenience. She'd often leave her laptop unlocked when she stepped away, trusting that I wouldn't snoop. That trust was about to be her undoing. I waited for my opportunity, a day when she was distracted by a phone call. I slipped into her room, my heart pounding in my chest, and quickly installed a keystroke logger on her laptop. It was a small, undetectable program that would record every keystroke, every password, every message she typed. I knew it was a risky move, potentially illegal, but I was past the point of caring about the rules. She had broken them first. Over the next few days, the keystroke logger worked its magic. I collected a trove of information, including her passwords to various online accounts and, more importantly, transcripts of her encrypted messages with the real estate agent and the buyer of the lake house. The messages confirmed everything: the secret negotiations, the inflated sale price, and Sarah's cut of the deal, all carefully concealed from our parents and me. I now had the ammunition I needed, but I needed to present it in a way that would be undeniable. That's when I decided to enlist the help of a friend, Mark, who worked in digital forensics. I hadn't told him everything, just that I suspected Sarah of some shady business dealings and needed his help to analyze some data. Mark was a genius with computers. He could recover deleted files, trace IP addresses, and make sense of the most complex digital information. He agreed to take a look, his curiosity piqued by the challenge. I provided him with the transcripts of Sarah's messages and the bank statements, careful to redact any information that might reveal the full extent of her betrayal. I watched as Mark worked his magic, using his expertise to authenticate the messages and trace the flow of funds. He confirmed that the offshore account was indeed linked to Sarah and that the transactions were consistent with the sale of the lake house. He also uncovered evidence of other suspicious activity, smaller transactions that suggested Sarah had been skimming money from our parents' accounts for years. The realization that her deception went even deeper than I had imagined sent a fresh wave of anger through me. I felt sick. How long had she been playing us? With Mark's help, I compiled a comprehensive report, documenting every detail of Sarah's scheme, complete with screenshots, transaction records, and forensic analysis. It was a damning indictment, a digital paper trail that would expose her lies to the world. But I knew that simply presenting this evidence to my parents wouldn't be enough. Sarah was a master manipulator, and she would try to twist the narrative, to play the victim, to somehow escape the consequences of her actions. I needed a way to ensure that she couldn't deny the truth, that she couldn't weasel her way out of this. That's when I decided to go public. I knew it was a risky move, potentially damaging to our family's reputation, but I was convinced that it was the only way to ensure that justice was served. I started researching media outlets, looking for investigative journalists who specialized in financial crime. I found one, a reporter named Emily, who had a reputation for uncovering corruption and holding powerful people accountable. I reached out to her, explaining that I had evidence of a significant fraud involving a family member, and that I was willing to share my story, provided she could guarantee my anonymity. Emily was intrigued. She agreed to meet with me, and I presented her with the report I had compiled. She was stunned by the evidence, recognizing the potential for a major scandal. She promised to investigate further and to protect my identity. It was a gamble, trusting a stranger with such sensitive information, but I felt like I had no other choice. The waiting was the hardest part. Days turned into weeks as Emily and her team investigated Sarah's scheme, verifying the evidence and interviewing sources. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, wondering if Sarah would discover my plan, if the story would be leaked prematurely, if everything would fall apart. I continued to play the part of the loving sister, smiling and nodding as Sarah went about her life, oblivious to the impending storm. It was a constant act, a draining performance that left me feeling exhausted and empty. But I knew that I had to keep it up, to maintain the illusion of normalcy until the moment was right to strike. Meanwhile, I took steps to protect myself. I consulted with a lawyer, explaining my situation and seeking advice on how to navigate the legal ramifications of exposing Sarah's fraud. I learned about whistleblower protections, about defamation laws, and about the potential for Sarah to retaliate against me. I also made sure to document everything, keeping a detailed record of my interactions with Emily, Mark, and my lawyer in case I needed to defend myself in court. I was prepared for anything. The day finally arrived when Emily called me with the news. Her investigation was complete, and she was ready to publish her story. She had secured corroborating evidence from other sources, including former business partners of the buyer of the lake house, who confirmed that Sarah had been involved in the negotiations. She had also obtained copies of Sarah's tax returns, which showed that she had failed to report the income from the sale of the lake house. The story was airtight, ready to withstand any challenge. Emily told me that she would be publishing the story online the following morning and that she would be alerting law enforcement authorities. She warned me to be prepared for the fallout, as the story was likely to generate significant media attention. I thanked her for her help and hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment of truth had arrived. I spent the rest of the day preparing myself, mentally and emotionally, for what was to come. I knew that my life would never be the same again, but I also knew that I had done the right thing. I had exposed Sarah's betrayal and I had taken back my power. The next morning, the story went live. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone, news alerts, social media mentions, and messages from friends and family. There it was, my name carefully omitted, but Sarah's name splashed across the screen for the world to see. The article detailed the entire scheme, from the secret sale of the lake house to the offshore account and the evidence of skimming from our parents' accounts. It included quotes from Emily, the investigative journalist, and from sources who corroborated my story. It was a comprehensive and damning account of Sarah's betrayal, leaving no room for doubt about her guilt. I braced myself for the storm. I knew Sarah would be furious, that she would lash out at me, that she would try to deny the truth. But I was ready for her. I had anticipated her every move. I knew her better than she knew herself. The first call came within minutes. It was my mom. Her voice was trembling with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Nora, what is this?" I took a deep breath and calmly explained everything, from the moment I first suspected Sarah's deception to the day I decided to go public. I told her about the offshore account, about the encrypted messages, about the evidence I had gathered with Mark's help. I told her about the years of lies and manipulation. My mom listened in silence, her sobs growing louder with each revelation. When I finished, she was inconsolable. How could she do this? I told her that I didn't know, that I couldn't understand Sarah's motives, but that I had done what I had to do to protect our family. I knew that this would break her heart, but I hoped that one day she would understand. Then came Sarah's call. Her voice was ice cold, barely a whisper. "Nora, you're dead to me." I felt a sliver of satisfaction. She finally knew. She finally understood that she couldn't play me anymore. I spoke calmly, deliberately. "I exposed your lies, Sarah." Her tone shifted instantly. The coldness evaporated, replaced by a desperate plea. "Please, Nora, don't do this. Think about Mom and Dad." I scoffed. She tried to manipulate me, to guilt-trip me, to make me feel responsible for the pain she had caused. But I was immune to her tactics. I had spent too many years being her victim. "It's too late, Sarah. The truth is out." The phone went dead. I knew what was coming next. She would try to discredit me, to smear my name, to turn our parents against me. She would fight dirty, but I was ready for her. I had anticipated her every move. I had built a fortress around myself, armed with the truth. I knew that the next few days, weeks, months would be a battle, but I was prepared to fight. I would not let her win. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. News crews descended on our parents' house, reporters hounded them for comment, and social media exploded with opinions and speculation. Our family was thrust into the spotlight, our private lives dissected and analyzed for the world to see. It was a chaotic and overwhelming experience, but I remained focused on my goal, to hold Sarah accountable for her actions. My parents were devastated, torn between their love for Sarah and the undeniable evidence of her betrayal. My dad was furious, his anger directed at Sarah for her deception and at me for exposing it. He couldn't understand why I had gone public, why I hadn't tried to resolve the situation privately. He accused me of being vindictive, of wanting to hurt Sarah. My mom, on the other hand, was more understanding. She recognized the gravity of Sarah's actions and the pain that I had endured. She was heartbroken, but she also knew that I had done what I thought was right. She told me that she loved me, regardless of what had happened, and that she would always be there for me. Their reactions were a mix of pain, confusion, and anger. It was exactly as I had predicted. Sarah, predictably, denied everything. She claimed that the offshore account was a misunderstanding, that the encrypted messages were fabricated, and that I was simply trying to ruin her life out of jealousy. She hired a high-powered lawyer and launched a public relations campaign to discredit the story and paint herself as the victim. She gave interviews to television networks, portraying herself as an innocent woman unfairly accused by her vengeful sister. It was a masterful performance, but I knew that it was all a lie. I had the proof, and I was prepared to defend myself. I contacted Emily, the journalist, and provided her with additional evidence to counter Sarah's claims. I also gave her permission to reveal my identity, knowing that it was the only way to set the record straight. I was no longer afraid of the consequences. I was ready to face the world, to tell my story, and to fight for justice. The turning point came when Emily published a follow-up article, revealing my identity and presenting even more damning evidence against Sarah. The article included transcripts of Sarah's communications with her lawyer, in which she admitted to the fraud and discussed strategies for covering it up. It also included statements from former business associates who testified that Sarah had a history of dishonest dealings. The article was a devastating blow to Sarah's credibility. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, exposing the truth beneath. The public turned against her, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. Law enforcement authorities launched a formal investigation, and Sarah was facing the possibility of criminal charges. Seeing the walls closing in around her, Sarah made a desperate move. She contacted me, begging me to drop the charges, promising to return the money, and vowing to make amends for her actions. She claimed that she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, and that she would do anything to fix it. But I didn't believe her. I knew that she was only acting out of self-preservation, that she didn't truly regret her actions. I had seen too much, endured too much, to fall for her lies again. I told her that it was too late, that the damage was done, and that she would have to face the consequences of her choices. Then I did something she wouldn't expect. I offered her a chance. "There's one way you can start to make things right," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "Confess. Tell the truth to Mom and Dad, to the world." That was when I sprung the final trap. I knew Sarah's weakness. It wasn't money, it wasn't power. It was her desperate need to be seen as perfect, as successful, as blameless. Publicly confessing would shatter that image, stripping her bare. But I also knew her pride wouldn't allow it. I'd made arrangements beforehand. I had recorded our conversation with legal consent, of course, playing by her rules. It was insurance. I knew she would never willingly confess. The recording was my ace in the hole, the final piece of the puzzle that would complete her downfall. I leaked the recording to Emily. The recording was played on every news channel, every radio station, every social media platform. Sarah's carefully constructed world imploded. The fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah was ostracized by her friends, her business associates, and even her own family. Her reputation was ruined, her career was over, and her future was uncertain. The authorities swooped in, the investigation intensified, and the threat of criminal charges loomed large. As I watched Sarah's world crumble, I felt a sense of cold satisfaction. I had done it. I had exposed her betrayal. I had held her accountable, and I had reclaimed my power. But as the dust settled, I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. The truth detonated like a bomb. Sarah, cornered and exposed, finally cracked. Her confession wasn't a grand, tearful admission of guilt to our parents. Instead, it was a pathetic, rambling mess delivered through her lawyer as part of a plea bargain, a desperate attempt to lessen her sentence. The lawyer, slick and devoid of empathy, read out a statement acknowledging her fraud, her deceit, her theft, but it lacked sincerity, ringing hollow and false. The words were there, but the remorse was absent. It was a performance for the courts, not a genuine expression of regret. Our parents watched the press conference on television, their faces etched with pain and disappointment. My mother wept silently, while my father stared blankly at the screen, his hands clenched into fists. The illusion of their perfect daughter, the golden child, had been shattered, replaced by the ugly reality of her greed and betrayal. The house felt heavy, suffocating with unspoken grief and anger. The silence was deafening, broken only by my mother's sobs. I wanted to comfort them, to tell them that everything would be okay, but I knew that wasn't true. The damage was done, the wounds were deep, and the scars would remain forever. Sarah's legal team tried every trick in the book. They argued that she was mentally unstable, a victim of circumstance, anything to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. But the evidence was overwhelming, the case was airtight, and the judge wasn't buying it. She was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The sentence was severe but just, several years behind bars, along with hefty fines and restitution payments. As she was led away in handcuffs, Sarah glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred and resentment. In that moment, I saw the true depth of her darkness, the extent of her depravity. She would never accept responsibility for her actions, never acknowledge the pain she had caused. She would remain forever trapped in her world of lies and deceit. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and family drama. Our lives were turned upside down, our privacy shattered, our reputations tarnished. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of closure, a feeling that justice had been served. Sarah was gone. The threat was over. I could finally breathe. I watched her life crumble from afar. The mansion was sold. The fancy cars were repossessed. Her social circle vanished. The perfect life she'd so meticulously constructed was reduced to ashes. The once untouchable Sarah was now a pariah, scorned and abandoned. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in her downfall, only a profound sadness. I hadn't wanted to destroy her life. I had simply wanted to protect my family. But her actions had left me with no choice. I had to fight back, to expose her lies, to hold her accountable. In the end, she had brought it all upon herself. The years passed. My parents slowly began to heal, though the scars of Sarah's betrayal remained. They never fully recovered from the shock and disappointment, but they found a way to move forward, to rebuild their lives, to find joy again. They eventually sold the family home, too many painful memories, and moved to a small cottage by the sea. They spent their days gardening, reading, and taking long walks on the beach. They found peace in simplicity, solace in each other's company. As for me, I moved on with my life. I focused on my career, my friendships, and my own happiness. I refused to let Sarah's actions define me or consume me. I learned from the experience, growing stronger and wiser. I understood the importance of trust, honesty, and integrity. I also learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to fight back, to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The finality of it all settled. Sarah lost everything. And me? I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a victorious one. It was the ghost of a smile, a faint curve of the lips that acknowledged the end of a long, dark chapter. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the bitter medicine you swallow when someone tries to unalive your soul. It's the shield you raise when someone comes for your family. It's the quiet strength you find when you realize you're the only one who can save yourself. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.